Hi, loves. So I wanted to share some time with you inside of all that's happening. We could start with the most important thing. Black Lives Matter. I've put a couple of videos in the newsletter. One is a video by Trevor Noah. The other is an interview with the comedian Michael Che. And both of them, I'm not on social media, and I haven't done media actually in general for years. So I'm sure there's a lot more out there, and a lot probably more, maybe even more articulate. But these are both two very articulate, heartfelt, kind of simple deliveries of an understanding of the protests and the riots, and even why is there a destructive nature to them, right? A deeper understanding is what Trevor Noah brings in that talk. And then the interview with Michael Che is just, there's a sweetness and authenticity, just a real, he's speaking to Black Lives Matter movement. And I offer those to you. I feel like if you're wanting to kind of open more, listen more deeply, and also just get more educated. I realize that there are a ton of ways to get educated right now, but I thought I would include those because, what I have to speak to just in terms of my tradition, I've been asking, what do I have to offer, And, it's obviously different than that. It's going to come from a deep feminine tradition. It just comes from more of the kind of looking at the foundations of things and specifically what came up for me or what felt like had some relevance are some of the teachings around the alchemista. So the alchemista being she who moves in the world, she who creates change, she who transmutes poison into medicine, right? And I feel like, as I'm speaking to all of you, I know that what unifies you is that you're women. You are multinational, you're multi-generational, you're multiracial, you're all over the socioeconomic spectrum. So, what I would speak to, and that feels mine to offer, is just some of these deep feminine sensibilities that might inform and support how you're navigating your part and your piece of what's happening. So, what are those? There were two things. One thing I would like to just offer you some pieces from what it is to move from the true yin field into true yang movement. So, this is a discussion in a way of silence, right? So there is a really big difference between a silence that fosters invisibility, that is like an absence, has an uncaring or it's an absence of something, right? An absence of presence. There's a really big difference between that and the silence that roots you in the yin field, roots you in deep feminine resource, where it is going to take silence actually in order to find the deep listening that's necessary, both deeply listening to our own, all that's moving inside of us, and deeply listening to what's being spoken, what needs to be heard, what needs to be seen, right? There's a certain amount of silence that is necessary, but there's a silence that is potent, right? What is that silence that has volcanic power in it? That's the yin field. That's the truth of the yin field, and the truth of silence that is a deep listening versus silence that is an absence, right? Or a lack of response, a lack of caring. So I would just offer that because there's, from out here, for myself, what it looks like is that there is a deep need to keep rooting all of the movement, all of the action, all of the words, all of the everything in a silence that is deeply listening. That this is a time when these two things really need to be deeply married to each other, right? And in natural law and Taoist understanding of natural law, it is the yin field, the power, this deeply listening, receptive, potent, and volcanic force of nature, right? This is not passive force. The yin field is a gathering of power. It's potentizing. But in Taoist understanding of natural law, it's the yin field and having a root in that gives yang movement, meaning any movement from that, a certain amount of integrity, right? It makes action right action. It makes words, right proportion, right timing, right relationship, right? So I have no idea how that would apply specifically to whatever is like right in front of you, but I would say that I would invite you to give a place to that silence because of its, both because of its potency, because if you're deeply listening, especially as women, you're going to be drawing something from a deeper well. And what lives more deeply inside of you, the intuition, the knowing, the instinctual understanding of justice, the mother of all that lives in you, this ancient presence that is the protectress of life, right? There's this, for you to remember silence as a resource and to be able to feel into when it is actually deeply listening and when it is a gathering of power feels really important to me, because you are going to be the ones to keep anchoring the movement, anchoring this, there's a destruction happening, there's a necessary chaos, there's a necessary breaking apart of things. It's necessary. This has its holy place. And in that, there also is, the yin field, this deep listening, this deep silence, and the sourcing of action from that place is what's going to help hold us intact inside of that, right? And really support the actual birth of something new, right? There's this kind of destruction and this reckoning with dehumanization and systemic racism, but systemic dehumanization, it's a massive movement to bring a reckoning to foundations of being, right? So in that, there's also these very tender, there's like tender new understandings, tender new alliances and bridges, and there's our right timing, our sense of moving from a place of deeper wisdom is part of what's going to inform us when we are supporting a movement that needs to both create massive change and a certain amount of just destruction, of putting things in the ground, and also that needs to support a new life, some very that needs a tenderness, needs a nuance, needs a deep listening, as well as a intensity of action, right? So just to presence that it's Taoist natural law. It acknowledges that underneath of everything, right, is this movement of true yin to true yang. And if you understand that true yin, the yin field, silence that's potent, silence that has a power in her own right, and that has the capacity to deeply listen, if you understand that as a root and a foundation for true yang, which is true yang movement that penetrates into the world, that creates change, that creates beauty, that uses the sword, right? That you can hopefully then, I think a lot of what the deeper question is not just will you be in action, but can your action be right? Can it create something different than what has been before? And that is going to take some really deep listening. And the silence that allows deep listening is power in and of itself. So, true yin and true yang, just a note of what that difference between silence is gathering power and silence that is receptive deep listening versus silence that's an absence or that fosters invisibility. The only other thing, a million things have come through my mind, but the thing that seems relevant is just that, one of the arts of the alchemist is to transmute poison, right? To take a poison and either make it into medicine or just change it into something else, right? To change its form. And when we're working with Alchemista in the school in different ways, a lot of what we're doing is distilling down. So we try to distill things to their essence. Because it's kind of in that more, I realize this is a little vague, but it's in that more essential place that we can often access more wisdom about them and make a more fundamental change. So, for instance, you can take the specifics of what's happening now, right? The specifics of the specifics of just racial justice, racial equality, real, the specifics of that. I know that's wide, right? Of that, moving in America and what it's kind of the poison that it's pulling to the surface, like this movement towards humanization, the poison that is exposing, or that poison being exposed and then eliciting this response of humanization. There's that, and that is, that is what it is, right? And it has specifics to it and whatever. It's kind of what we're inside of. And if you boil down the essence, if you look to that and you say, all right, what is the essence of the poison that I'm working with, though? Like you personally, each one of us personally, right? There's a poison being revealed, right? And it's like, and what is the poison? It's the poison of dehumanization. It's the poison of usury. It's the poison of not listening, of deflection, of assumption of guilt based on racial stereotypes or stereotypes of any kind, right? Not seeking to know each other, instead seeking to just not seeking to know each other in truth, not being human with each other, not being protective of each other, right? Another poison that's being transmuted is the poison of power that uses its power to destroy rather than to protect life. Specifically, the extreme distortion of power that is vested in order to protect and serve life. that actually dehumanizes life instead, right? So if you distill it down, if you give yourself that, if you distill it down, that may make it easier for you to track it in your own being and to track it in all the forms that it expresses in. You know, the trick with these poisons is that they've been with humanity for millennia. And there's what they've done is they've moved through humanity in all sorts of different ways. They're sneaky, right? And the real art of actually fully transmuting these things, you know, the female body has a capacity to really transmute, to both give birth and bring the new, and take in something, take in an energy, take in the seed of something, take in poison and actually transmute it and give something else out, like within our beings, to do this sacred work of redeeming the world, right? Taking it in and giving something else back, right? It's transmuting poison, right? So I just say that because in transmuting poison, there's a real vigilance needed in order to understand the essence of the poisons, to understand and to watch the way that they will try then to shift form, shift expression, but still be the same poison. So dehumanization in any way, you know, all this subtle, simple, like, you know, Facebook itself has a certain element of dehumanization to it, right? See that, right? All social media even, right, is a platform where people are, just by its nature, are somewhat dehumanized to one another. It doesn't mean that there's not extreme value and that it's not a place where communication and movement, it doesn't mean that, but it also means to be vigilant, right? And to really, you know, it's going to take work. It's going to take some real vigilance if we are going to each individually in our lives take these poisons and transmute them into something different, actually different, and to stop the movement of these toxins, these human darknesses, right? So, you know, there are practices for that. We're not in practice together. You're wise, and it's more just you know, feeling the relevance that this is an alchemical time and that there are certain dangers and certain arts to alchemizing that may serve you. I don't know. The final little bit I would say is that in alchemy, you have to watch your vessel, right? So it's like you're transmuting something. Maybe it's your own darkness and your own dehumanization. Maybe it's that you're working to transmute dehumanization on a systemic level. It's probably both, right? So there's a lot of alchemy happening right now. And for alchemy to really be successful, we have to be really aware of the vessel that it's happening in. You know, you think of it as like, if you know alchemy at all, there's a crucible, and inside the crucible elements are placed and the work is done inside this crucible. If the crucible falls apart, if the crucible springs a leak or cracks and is fractured, the alchemy is over, right? So there's, and this is part of deep feminine tradition all over, which is the vessel. Be aware of your vessel. And there's you know, with alchemy there is a fine art to bringing in enough fuel, enough stuff, enough poison, or enough, you know, whatever, that you have something to work with, but not too much that you break the vessel or you burn out or you drown, right? So all that means is that each of you wherever you are, you have your part. The deep listening is going to tell you what your part is. It's also going to show you what your resistances to your part are, and what needs to shift in you to give way to what is really being elicited from you. You know, this deeper call that's asking you to listen, to act, to whatever you're particularly being called to, that there's going to be a process of needing to actually give way to that and to alchemize, to shift what might be in the way of that. Point is, I would also just encourage you to be aware of walking that line, because you know, you sitting frozen in front of the media, consuming a whole bunch of everybody's conversations and images and all of that stuff, if it's just freezing your body and making it you unable to move and like suffocating you and not actually making you of use, or you know, if it's not, then it's officially too much. You've taken in too much. Like, you could maybe take in just the littlest bit and have that inform your action, right? Because it's elicited your response. That's the point of these things. You take in enough to elicit a response, and then you go with your response. You get behind it. You do the thing, right? You come into action. There is a danger for sure right now of overconsumption of poison, and thinking that just by consuming, just by consuming, just by whatever, you know, it's a thing that happens with media a lot, but that you listen, you take in just enough to shift your being so that your actions, your moment to moment human actions with another person are changed, right? So that your choices are actually changed and you make different choices and you're in action, right? And so be careful about and notice your state of being. You know, notice if you're actually just kind of frozen, or you know, what are all other signs of having taken on just too much and kind of, you know, we want to look for usefulness. We want to be useful, not so if you find yourself frozen, if you find yourself like confused, like unable to know what to do, it's really important to recognize that then a different element is needed. Maybe you need to come silent, come center, and listen. What is your peace? No, really, what is it? You know, maybe you need to get out of media and all these things and do something. And maybe you need to also recognize that whatever is yours to do is probably right there in front of you. There is so much for you to, you know, in order to be in solidarity with this movement of justice, with this movement of cultural and social change, you know, the movement is huge, the change is huge, like the dehumanization, the racialization is really deeply rooted. There's a bigness to it. And again, what will make alchemy possible is that you take enough of that to fuel all the work that you do right in your place. Like, we each have our own place and our own piece, our own world, our own realm. And I say that just to say that it might feel like a drop in the bucket, but if it's you doing something, if it's you talking to your children, or I don't know, just being more available in the grocery store. I don't know really where all of you are. You're really diverse, but I would just say that I have a care and a concern for knowing that your alchemical potential is huge, that especially with the reality that deep feminine sensibility lives in you, the life-giving, the life-protecting, the justice-keeping. You know, there is so much that's inherent in us because we are made to gestate and create and sustain and protect life, right? And that I really want you to honor that inside of yourself and give yourself enough to activate that and to be that and to do whatever that is, to give way to whatever that is. That felt a little rambling, but there it is. So I'm here, I'm listening. Yeah, I'm here and I'm listening. And I think there's obviously a really important, huge work to be done. And that our capacity to open our hearts, like actually open and become receptive and let what we're seeing, what's being revealed, actually really hurt like it should and like it does, and carve us out and elicit a deeper response from us. That's the holy work at this time. And I wish you strength in that. I wish you kindness with each other. I wish that you remember that humanizing, making more human, being more human is something that we do with every word and every action. It's not far. And although these are complex issues, there's also a deep simplicity here. And in that simplicity, you have so much power to change, to stand in solidarity, to act in solidarity. So please do. Blessed be.